Hello there, trick-or-treaters. I see you've braved yet another week of Tales from the Campfire. I didn't think you had it in you, but I'm quite impressed. You're back for more. And you will not be disappointed. This week brings us Manda, also known as Halloween Homemaker on Instagram. She's provided us with her own terrifying tale of terror, which is repetitive, but true. So, enough of my yammering. Take it away, Manda.
Everyone knows that basements can be creepy. There's no end to stories of things that go bump in the damp, dark shadows, in rooms encased in earth. Usually, it's just an overactive imagination playing tricks. But sometimes, for those unlucky few, the things that go bump reach out of the darkness and do more than scream boo. Danny was 11 years old, growing up in a small town in the middle of nowhere. 5 years earlier, tragedy struck her family when her oldest brother died. Death consumed her life as she watched her family fall apart. The kids at school bullied her because she was always sad. They didn't know the never-ending assault that death took on her. When there's a tragic death, life will always be broken into two categories: before the death and after. Before the accident, and even before they moved to 5th Street, life was okay. Things were going well enough that Danny's mom could finally afford to quit renting and buy a house. She found a big house well underpriced. She didn't think anything of the fact that it had been on the market for years with no takers, because it was structurally sound, and she could finally give her family the home she'd always dreamed of. Shortly after moving in, though, everything started going downhill. One thing after another, everything that could go wrong did. Danny's mom had to take on 2 extra jobs just to afford all the bills piling up. She became overstressed and mean. Her boyfriends always changed from dream dates to drunks with anger. Each time a relationship ended, her mom would shift her stress relief onto Danny. More nights than not, Danny cried herself to sleep, just hoping that everything would go back to the way things used to be. Then the dreaded phone call came. Her brother had been in a car crash that ejected him from the windshield. He didn't survive. After her mom had to make the decision to take him off of life support, Danny's dreams of her old life died too. Since her mom worked a lot, she happily had plenty of alone time as a latchkey kid. Except in small towns, nobody locks their doors. One day, Danny was in the basement digging through craft supplies when, out of the corner of her eye, she saw something pass by the doorway. At first, she thought it was her cat. When she called her cat's name, "Patches!" and she didn't come, she peeked around the doorframe. No cat. Danny shrugged it off as trick of the light and went back to the craft supplies. Then she heard a crash. When she turned around, she saw what appeared to be an armadillo with glowing red eyes, walking upright. When it passed through the doorway, it stopped and hissed at her. She started screaming and ran through the basement, up the stairs, and slammed the basement door as fast as she could. Her mom was just getting home from work and was incensed with the commotion. Danny tried to explain what she had seen, but her mom insisted that it was just the cat and that she'd been watching way too many scary things on TV. When Danny went to bed that night, she left all the lights on. She couldn't get the incident out of her head. Just as she was dozing off, she heard a swishing sound coming from behind her. Her blood ran cold. Her heart was pounding in her ears, and she broke out in a sweat. Without moving, she did a sensory check of her surroundings. Her cat was sound asleep against her back. It was a still night with no natural nor artificial air movement. She could think of nothing logical to explain the noise away. Slowly, she rolled over to see what was swishing. It was her calendar swinging violently back and forth on her bedroom door. As she was looking on in terror, her brush fell from its place on her corkboard, where it had hung for years without problem. She quickly grabbed her cat and ran through the door with the possessed calendar hung on it. Her mom woke up at 3:30 every morning and was understandably irritated to be woken up an hour before her alarm blared. Nobody went back to sleep. Danny was ready for school and at the bus stop earlier than she'd ever been. As she was waiting for the bus, long before the neighborhood kids got there, she couldn't help but notice that she lived in the triangle of weird. Kitty corner from the bus stop lived a dark, spooky house that every kid just knew to skip on Halloween. The town psychic medium lived and read there. Everyone thought she was a kook. Down and across the street was the unsuspecting house of a woman Danny knew only as Cat Lady. Legend has it that she was a failed movie starlet from the golden age of film. She wore gaudy jewelry, turbans encrusted with gemstones, and no matter the temperature, a faux fur leopard skin coat. At least she hoped that it was faux. But she wasn't called Cat Lady just because she had a lot of cats. Everyone said no cat was safe from Cat Lady because she killed them and drank their blood. One kid claims to have sneaked into her backyard and uncovered a pile of dead cats under a wooden crate, drained of all their blood and gutted. Danny was shaken from her macabre reverie by the bus screeching to a halt and exhaling as the doors opened to welcome more passengers. "Room for one more, honey," was all Danny could hear ringing through her ears. Even a trip to the morgue would be more peaceful than her haunted house. When she got to school that morning, Danny told her friends what had happened. They laughed and told her she was a lunatic if she really believed in ghosts. As her friends left to go spread the news, a girl named Heather, who was an even bigger freak than Danny, walked up to her. She told her that she had overheard her story and asked if it had really happened. Not wanting to be bullied by someone with even higher loser status, Danny said she'd just been making it up to scare her friends. Heather didn't believe Danny. She told her that her aunt was the town psychic and she might be able to help. They made plans for Heather to go home with Danny on the bus after school so that she could introduce Danny to her Aunt Esme. When they got off the bus that afternoon, Heather walked across the street and Danny cautiously followed. The house was engulfed by trees that seemed 1,000,000 feet tall, with dense landscaping lining the sidewalk. Walking under the canopy of the front yard forest, day turned to night. The cool air hugged her body as she sweated through her clothes. She couldn't tell if Heather was knocking on the door or if it was just her own heartbeat. Momentarily, the door creaked open to reveal a middle-aged woman wearing a purple lace shawl and a smile. Things aren't always what they seem. And Danny didn't know which way this would go, but to be on the safe side, she decided to decline any food or drink offered. Aunt Esme invited the girls in and guided them through beaded curtains into a parlor filled with things unfamiliar to Danny. She didn't recognize the crystals and other things, but surely thought that her mother would be displeased at her being entertained in such a blasphemous home. While Danny was taking in the new and enchanting scenery, Aunt Esme recognized something familiar within her. She broke Danny from her daydream and said, "You've come here because you've looked in the eyes of evil." "How do you know that?" Danny asked. "You and I aren't so different, Danny. You have the gift of seeing, as do I. I want you to know that your experiences are very real and very dangerous. You must learn to control your gift. The portals in your home have had dire effects on your family." "What do you mean?" Danny asked, already knowing the answer. "Your mother is not who she once was. The light has burned out and has been replaced with darkness. Your brother was influenced out of this physical world, and the toll all of this is taking on you? Well, you know better than anyone. You must take back your power," Aunt Esme declared. "How do I do that? I have no power. I'm nothing." "Oh, no. Each of us is important. You'll see. Come with me. I want to introduce you to a dear friend who will be able to help." Esme led the girls out of the parlor, through the front yard forest, and across the street. As the three walked, the girls wondered where they were going. Then they stopped in front of a house with a cat suncatcher in the window and what they believed were piles of cat corpses inside. Esme rang the bell, and Cat Lady answered the door. She was wearing her usual leopard print, but a peek through the door didn't reveal piles of cats, dead or alive. Maybe she keeps them in the freezer to combat the stench, Danny thought. "Danny, Heather, I'd like you to meet my friend Clarice. Clarice, this is my niece Heather and her friend Danny. May we come in?" Aunt Esme asked. "Certainly. I have just started a kettle of tea if anyone would like some. Please take a seat," Clarice said, disappearing into the kitchen. "Don't drink it. It's probably how she poisons the cats," Heather whispered to Danny. Aunt Esme overheard and put a stop to the rumors once and for all. Clarice walked in on the admonishment, and the girls shone bright red. She told them that she was a recluse who left Hollywood, but Hollywood didn't leave her. Her cats were her only family when she came back feeling disgraced and unwelcomed by the small town that only loved her when she had something to give. Danny could relate. Her friends only used her for stuff, which was a replacement for love. But the love of a cat was unconditional and pure. Clarice showed the girls around the house to dispel any lingering doubts. No dead cats, no cat blood as the elixir for everlasting life. But there was a room with a giant book of spells and other occult objects. Suddenly, Danny was no longer at ease. Luckily, I didn't drink any of that tea, she thought. Tell me what's going on at home, Danny, Clarice said. Danny took a deep breath and resigned herself to the weird, supernatural life that had seemed to take over her own. She told everyone in great detail everything that had happened. Esme and Clarice consulted with each other. Pages of the spellbook flew open to reveal incantations and rituals that she'd need to clear her home of evil and close the portals. Clarice gathered jars, crystals, sage, and other things that Danny would need. Hold on. Do I need to do this alone? I'm scared, and I've never seen this stuff before. Clarice stopped and put her hands on Danny's shoulders. The world kept spinning around them, but Danny looked into Clarice's eyes and felt her words. You are one of us, Danny. Believe in yourself, and good will come. That night, armed with the stuff and the instructions, Danny prepared for the ritual. She began by opening all the doors and windows. She turned off all the lights. With candles lit and her circle prepared, she lit her smudge sticks. After she set her intentions, she said the invocation and repeated it over and over. It gave her strength, and she felt safe. Evil lurking in the shadows of heart and home, I am light, and I banish thee through the open portals, never to return. Evil lurking in the shadows of heart and home, I am light, and I banish thee through the open portals, never to return. Evil lurking in the shadows of heart and home, I am light, and I banish thee through the open portals, never to return. Suddenly, the swell of energy that had been building up burst. She could feel the air vibrating at a higher frequency that alleviated the constant feeling of dread, replacing it with joy. When her ears began ringing with the silence left by the dark energy's exit, she closed the circle and walked around her house, closing portals, physical and otherworldly. After everything, she was exhausted and slept like the dead. The next morning, Danny's mom woke her up. She was in a good mood. They had breakfast and talked like they used to. For the first time, in a long time, Danny felt hope for the future. Her mom told her she had had a dream the night before about her brother. He told me, "Mom, everything is going to be okay." And he hugged me. It felt so real. It was just what I needed. Danny knew it wasn't just a dream. They could finally begin again in the land of the living.
Are you scared yet? Thank you, Manda, for that wonderful story. Join us next week as Nicole, also known as GrindhausFX from Instagram, joins us with her own spooky story for the campfire. Till then, stay scared.